All right. Well, I'm getting the thumbs up that we are live. So we are good to go. Well, first off, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to discuss the differences between short-term and long-term rental properties. Now, over the last few years, more and more investors have asked us about Airbnbs than any other real estate investment strategy. And honestly, I get it. I understand. Social media and real estate platforms, they look like everyone was buying a cabin in the mountains. Everybody was buying beachfront property and just raking in thousands of dollars off of their real estate investment. And honestly, how does long-term rental properties, how do you compete with that? In all of that, exposure, it's made long-term rentals look very boring. So we wanted to talk about it. We wanted to dive into it, but I preface it, we're not going to just sit here and bash Airbnbs. There are absolutely people making money in the short-term rental space. We do, however, believe that it is glorified and it is misunderstood. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to dive into the realities of it. We're going to talk about the numbers, the risks, the misconceptions, the trade-offs. And then we want to look at a typical long-term rental property versus a typical short-term rental property and evaluating the two solely based on the numbers, just on the income and the rate of return. Because at the end of the day, the best strategy is not necessarily the flashiest one. I can think of no one better to dive into the weeds and get into the numbers than our very own Danny Cole. Danny, thank you so much for doing this today.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. I'm excited to be here and discuss this. And as you mentioned, it's something that comes up quite often. Customers sometimes unknowingly will bring it up as it's the end all be all. It's the best thing ever. I'm trying this. And I'll ask them a simple question. Why? Why is that the end all be all? Why is this the greatest thing since sliced bread? And they're like, just because it is sometimes. And so I think education is paramount to all things investing. And I'm excited to dig into this today. So,
all right.
Well, first off, as Lindsay mentioned, what are we learning today? As she said before, this is not a bash Airbnb segment. It's just to educate. And the second thing is we're going to go through the full gamut of the rise to fame, the obstacles, the misconceptions, the compare and contrast, and everything like that, so that you guys have a clear understanding of just what you're looking at. And granted, every property is going to be different, just like every long term, just like every short term. They're all vetted differently or individually. So always take the properties individually, but at the same time, this will help you understand quite a bit more about the industry. So,
yeah, and I think it's important to start with the history, like you said, kind of starting with the rise of it, because how did we get here? It seems like it blew up overnight. We've been doing long-term rentals for 15 years now, and these conversations are new.
Yeah. And it was funny because the COVID era, it really sparked everything with Airbnb. It was just a huge change and shift. Hotels were shutting down. You had people, they wanted to be by themselves. It's just kind of like in 2019, we shifted to, in a long-term rental stance, we shifted to a digital lockbox system. And that couldn't have came at a better time because no one wanted to see a leasing agent. They were like, no, that's cool.
Can you imagine if we hadn't made that change then? Man, I'm telling you, the stars aligned for us there.
Yeah, it could have been catastrophic. So with that in mind, people wanted that isolation, and they quit going into the cities. They quit going to concerts. They quit going to all of those things. And they went to the cabin in the woods, the camping trips, and things just kind of with their families, because it just made sense at the time. International was out of the question. A lot of flights were out. So that wasn't an option either. So as we do this, as you know, offices shut down. When offices shut down, people were working from home. And that was, I think, the biggest spark, because people, when they were working from home, they would look at their spouse and say, you know what is home? What really is home? So I can work from home here, or I can work from Gatlinburg, Tennessee, or I can work from Panama City Beach or Colorado in the mountains somewhere. So they were able to make these stays much longer than your typical long or short-term rental. They were able to stay a month, 2, 3 weeks at a time, and really take advantage of that away time from work, because they didn't have that Monday morning office trip they had to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I get it too. I mean, you get a better view in the morning before you start your workday. So I'm here for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So all you need is Wi-Fi in most cases. So yeah, this just took away some of that seasonality to what most Airbnbs, especially vacation spots. Some Airbnbs are structured differently. They may be in a city or something like that, but the mountain, the beach homes and stuff like that, they have their own risk, but they are definitely seasonal. And so it was just the easy go-to option. And then beyond that, in that time period, it's money that we'll never find as cheap again. I don't think in my lifetime. I kind of hope we don't, really.
Agreed.
Because, I mean, I remember 9% inflation numbers year over year, and that's not a great thing. And when interest rates get that cheap and you see people venturing into Airbnb spaces more and more often, so your occupancy's up and everybody around the water cooler is talking about it. The water cooler was kind of non-existent because nobody was going to the office, but you get the idea. So people were talking, the rates were cheap, and the delta between cost and what they could make in those early years was phenomenal. It was really, really good. And so those monthly payments and again, that delta looked really good. So investors could cash flow, they could justify higher purchases, and they would also look at that even in that time period, especially when you got into later 2020, 2021 and 2, there was a lot of competition in many markets. So when people were going through that, it was already tight, but then they would give it more of a premium for Airbnbs because they were like, well, I have the high cash flow. I can make it make sense, which was kind of a downfall in the later years because they ended up paying too much and that delta started slimming up. So with 2020 nightly rates, high occupancy, all that, people were making good money. It was just a perfect storm. I mean, to put it quite frankly. And then it kind of hit a tipping point, more or less. This chart will show that and
it's a drastic drop, right? It is a drastic increase, but just the same drop on that. I think this chart is very powerful.
It is. It's insane because, some people will kind of minimalize the changes that they've seen in a 3 or 5 year period. But when you see it on paper, and folks, what this chart is the delta between the average mortgage cost and the premium that would be paid for a short-term rental. And obviously the $2,500 mark is a pretty big deal. And just in a couple of years, and that's in 2021 and 22. But during that time in 22, rates went up in a drastic fashion, in a very quick fashion. So you can see that rate change, and it's obviously correlated directly with mortgages here. And it was a straight down slope. I mean, that's a true ski slope. 24 was more, late 23 was the bottom. And nowadays you're seeing kind of a lower line, just over 1,000 or right around 1,000, give or take, but substantially different than what you were experiencing in those early years.
Yeah. And I think just really quick, and we're going to dive into this, and you're talking about the delta between the mortgage and what you're going to make in revenue. And so you're looking at it, it's like, well, $1,000, that still seems pretty good. And we're going to dive into that just because of with all of the fees. So I would hate for that, the takeaway for somebody to be like, well, hey, I'll bank $1,000 a month. That's not what the income is. That's just the difference between the revenue and your mortgage. That doesn't factor in any other expenses or anything like that.
Right. That's a great point, because that is one of the biggest obstacles that people face when it comes to short-term rentals. And they look at it in many cases, a universal glance, like long-term rentals, short-term rentals, and they think, oh, it's kind of all the same. Turnover, you've got some management fees, but they're night and day different.
Mm-hmm.
So I apologize. I'm a little hoarse today. Allergies have got me a bit. So when we look at this, the housing shortage pressure was a big deal. When that housing shortage pressure took place, you saw multiple bids on houses, fewer homes were available for just general long-term renters. And then cities really started pivoting here, and they started saying, hey, our town, our city is not affordable. We have no inventory when it comes to long-term rentals, and people have to live, people have to work, and it's not all about short-term rentals here. So within that focus, cities started regulating pretty hard. They weren't after investors. I don't think anybody was, but that wasn't their basis. Their basis wasn't like, hey, I'm a mountain town that lives on people vacationing. I am a city that thrives, and we've got a lot of diversity, kind of like Birmingham. We've got a lot of different things: medical, insurance, commercial, construction, et cetera, et cetera. So within that, you have to have housing. And so they started regulating. There started becoming permits. They limited those permits. And the reason this is important is because you could seemingly buy a property as a short-term rental and then all of a sudden find out like, oh, there's a permit in place. I'm 6 months, year, maybe never able to really rent this property out. So I'm sitting on something that I also can't afford to hold as a long-term rental because it doesn't make financial sense. I'm not getting the escalated price night over night with the long-term rental. So it put a lot of people in a bad situation.
Yeah. And I just have a really quick, like really good example. And I don't know if we've ever shared this, but this was kind of when everything was blowing up with short-term rentals. We purchased a property that had an ADU in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And this was like, hey, this is going to be Spartan's toe dip in the short term. We're going to figure this out. We'll try it out. You know, that's not what we've done. We purchased the property based on the numbers for a long term. So it still worked, but it was an ADU, and this place was walking distance from the University of Alabama's football stadium. So we're like, man, this is going to make so much money during football season. This is going to be great. And I promise you, we are mid-renovation, and the city of Tuscaloosa comes in because they had a border of where you could not Airbnb within the city limits of Tuscaloosa. While we were in renovation, they passed an ordinance expanding the I guess circle or lines, that the guidelines or whatever, to exclude this one area where we could not now do an Airbnb. And we're like, are you kidding me? Like, fine, whatever. Yeah. So we just pivoted, and it's a long-term rental for us now. But yeah, stuff like that, it happens. It happened to us.
And absolutely. And as you mentioned, that was an overnight kind of situation. You had no control over it. It was strictly the municipality's decision to make that change. And it wasn't like, oh, the change didn't exist. It was just like, they just moved the line, right? It was just, and you were very fortunate because you could pivot to a long-term rental because of your cost basis and everything involved. But many people buy this in a very emotional way. And when they do, they pivot they put all their eggs in one basket, and that's the STR. And then it's just an impossible cash flow situation for them. So going into it a little deeper, the non-owner occupied ban. So they were saying, hey, you basically have to live in the property. You have to house hack it to do that. So they didn't say you can't Airbnb, but so many people had housing that they did not live in, and they were trying to utilize it as an Airbnb, and that shut that down. The other big thing is taxes, fees, and just getting their pound of flesh as a city saying, hey, if you're going to operate like a hotel, we're going to treat you like a hotel. We're going to tax you, and fees and licensing and all of that stuff. The other big thing is, and I understand this, I completely can relate to this. I personally don't, personally don't live in a subdivision. But if I did, and somebody moved next door, let's say, I've been there 5 years, 10 years, and I've had the neighborhood that I want, and I have the children, I feel safe, they feel safe in the front yard. But all of a sudden you have different people coming every 3 days, and you just don't know who your neighbors are. And sometimes they're loud, and sometimes they party and all these things. So HOAs and neighborhoods absolutely wreaked havoc on a lot of Airbnbs. They just were like, no more, it's not working.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Which I mean, I agree with you. I completely understand. it was a big hit, and HOAs have the ability to shut that down completely. So even if the municipality in which you're doing business in allows it and is favorable to it, you could still potentially find yourself in an association that does not allow it. And so
Right.
there's a lot of boxes to check there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just comes down back to the moral of the story. Like, you can do everything right, and then something in that category could change it all for you, and it makes the deal non-functional.
Yeah.
Some of the other big misconceptions deal with financials. And I think this is a slippery slope for a lot of people, because they look at the ideal situation, and then reality strikes, and they're like, oh, wow, this isn't everything I thought it would be. First thing is, occupancy. People think, oh, I've got a long-term rental. I've got 5 long-term rentals, and it stays occupied most of the time. I have a 3-week turnover, or, period, a month, that it's occupied or not occupied every few years. And this will be similar. I'll keep people, moving through it. Well, reality is the average is 50 to 65%, but that depends on what you're doing. If you're a vacation market, it's 50 to 60, urban market, 60 to 70, highly seasonal, 40 to 55. And that highly seasonal side, you could make all the money you're going to make in 3 months, right? And let's say a bad storm comes up, that wipes that out during that time period. Let's say, like in North Carolina, when the hurricane came through and everything flooded, and it didn't impact your town, but it impacted the areas, the access to your town. That can be devastating, even if it's fixed inside of a month, because that was your peak earning seasons. So those are things that people need to think about regarding just how often will this be available or occupied. The last thing is big vacation. Airbnb is kind of synonymous with vacation rentals in many cases. It doesn't always have to be that way, but if you're in that situation, you run less of a risk of the municipality shutting you down, because they need that. It's a tourist community. But the first thing that people check out of in a bad economy is going to be vacations. And so you can see occupancy suffer in a great way because the economy is down, versus someone that needs a home, like in a long-term rental. So
Yeah, and I'm always surprised, and I don't want to say surprised, but it just a question that comes up a lot about, well, how do you guys fare? How does Spartan Invest and Atlas Rental Property, our PM company, how do you guys fare in a recession? And the answer is always the same. It's like we're fine. There might be a slight dip if it's a bad enough recession in the rental rates, but
right.
Because of the necessity of shelter, of housing, it does not see. But you want to talk about something that is drastically affected by a potential recession. And recessions happen all the time. They go through like this and this. But like you said, if you hit a recession in your peak seasonal time with your vacation Airbnb, I mean, that could just completely wipe out an entire year.
Absolutely. And again, it just doesn't have to be a long-term thing. It could be a month,
Yeah.
month and a half, and it's tough. So within that, there's also, as I mentioned, the financial side. Management is wildly different from long-term rentals and short-term rentals. So you have 3 options. You can self-manage, and a lot of people look at that as like, well, obviously that's the cheapest route. But let's just be honest, most people aren't self-managing their Airbnbs. If you're in a situation that you're retired, or that's your business and you have a lot of them in a close proximity, that's fantastic. That's great for you if it makes sense for you. And that's why this will be different for everyone. But for the most part, I think people need some help with management. Co-host is another option, but you also have to realize you're splitting the gains along with the penalties, fees, management, things of that nature. And then lastly is the big kahuna. It's the 20 to 35%. Full out management. Somebody's doing everything for you. This is as passive as humanly possible. So it's a situation that you have to trade time for money. And I have a friend of mine that's local. He has a house on the lake, had a house on the lake. It cash flowed every month. It stayed occupied very well. Had a pool behind the house. It was a beautiful setting. And he ended up selling it because he was like, Danny, every time I turned around, I was over there cleaning that stupid pool, and I was getting it ready for another tenant. And he said, it just took all my time. He said, Danny, I've got 3 kids. We obviously, both my wife and I work in the real estate industry as well. He said, it just quit making sense. He said, it's not all about the cash flow, but he just had too much time into it. So there's that. There's cleaning cost. With a long-term rental, you'll have a turnover depending on the market, a couple of years, maybe every 3 years. With this, you're talking the average stays 3 days. So it's a big difference. So cleaning cost is somewhere between 120 and 250. You're looking at, let's say a 63% average occupancy on average. You're not talking about a 92, a 95% occupancy. It's significantly different when it comes to occupied properties. And then when you talk about those cleaning fees, that's $1,000 a month, right? And based on those same averages. And then Airbnb has fees. They have processing fees and different things that again are just kind of behind the scenes. But you just need to be aware of them. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and going back to your friend that's always over there cleaning out the pool and stuff, and I know we've talked about this, it's just the expectation. If you are paying this, and I have a different expectation. If I am going on vacation, I'm spending a lot of money to go on vacation, the pool better be clean. Right? The hot tub better work, or my kids are going to revolt, like it's the expectation is just very different than like if you're moving into a long-term rental and it's like, okay, yeah, the grass needs to be cut. That's okay.
They see one out. I've been here a year. I'll call the guy, it's fine. It's a day, but yeah, couldn't agree more. The Cole kids will absolutely revolt if the hot tub's out of commission. And beyond that, we also look at a lot of other things regarding the house itself. When we go to the mountains, we always look for some type of entertainment. Maybe it's the hot tub and a gaming system of some kind. Like my wife and I played one time for hours, maybe not hours, for a long time when the kids went to bed, and they had this big barrel that had a game system built into it, and we played all the old Atari games and things like that. But those things, I looked it up and I was like, I'm going to buy one of those when I get home. That is so fun. We're going to put it in the basement. It was like $1,200. So I say that to say this, that's a $1,200 cost, and that's pretty minimal, right? A hot tub can cost anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000. So when you're setting up these homes, you have furniture, you have decor, the towels, linens, the little things, the obviously water, internet, garbage, sewer. And then you think about, okay, what about Netflix? What about the entertainment for that family? They're expecting those things. They're expecting home away from home. And again, with very little grace to you, unfortunately, because that's where bad reviews come in. So,
yeah, there's not a lot of give there.
No, not at all. So it's just from a cost perspective, it is a bit more expensive to make these homes ready to go, rent ready, if you will, and then maintenance in general. I think it's pretty conservative to say 3%, but you're not maintaining just the home, mind you. If you don't have a plush couch and good bedding and good furniture and something that's appealing to the family that's visiting, they'll simply give you a bad review. And that bad review circulates over to a poor occupancy level because people look at those. I look at them every time I rent a property.
So. Absolutely.
All right, moving on. Now I just kind of want to compare a short-term versus long-term option. And the easiest way I could do this is looking at a midterm market. And I wanted to use real numbers and keep things as close as I could. Now, the long-term rental cost is going to be a bit higher than the norm. It just is. But again, to do my best to keep this a apples to apples approach, we just went with the same numbers. And it's going to be about 25% higher. But in that, we looked at AirDNA. And AirDNA is one of the greatest sources for all things Airbnb and short-term rentals and the markets and the forecast and all these things. Well, what you're seeing on the screen here is a list of the mid-tier markets, or the top markets that they recommend, not Spartan recommends, but AirDNA recommends for 2026. And some of these, quite frankly, were very surprising to me. I was kind of flabbergasted by it.
Yeah, I've got to tell you, Montgomery, Alabama is listed as their number one market to invest in short-term rental is Montgomery, Alabama. I'm a fan of Alabama. I would have not guessed that, and I would have never thought to ever purchase a short-term rental in Montgomery. But hey, I'm not here to judge. I was very surprised.
Yeah, you could have given me 10 guesses and I would have still been wrong. It just wouldn't have happened. I did pull one property out of this, and I pulled Kauai. It's coastal, and I don't want people to think I'm again cherry picking the details here, and that's 514 a night. It's the average daily rate. And the reason I pulled this is because it's, again, just not, it's apples and oranges here. The most of these are midterm markets, much more affordable. But the thing to keep in mind though is that 514 a night, if you're in the, the Hawaiian Islands somewhere, that is going to be $1 million plus price tag if you have something that you can Airbnb. In most cases, it's just a much more expensive market. So as you go through this, I took all the other properties, I averaged them together. The average occupancy with what they gave us in AirDNA was 63%. The average daily rate was $136. That's taking all of those properties. So if I do that and I put that in for the first thing, I'm going to look at a long-term rental. And again, we're a little bit more expensive on that front, but we're going to showcase a $2,200 a month rental amount. We're going to focus on property management cost, maintenance cost, vacancy at 5%, and then management was 8%. The mortgage payment, principal and interest, taxes and insurance, everything was $1,663. So that was everything covered, and the net is nothing to write home about. Let's just be honest.
And that's not our average either, right? Like that's not a Spartan Invest house, but just trying to look at it apples to apples as much as we can.
That's exactly right. So again, it's $31 is nothing you're going to retire on, but we try to use the same numbers across the board. And when we look at this and we take that into a short-term rental, we use the same purchase price, but we did have to add some value in, just like we spoke about a moment ago, $25K for property furnishings. And that property furnishings includes, toys, items to entertain the families, hot tubs, all those things. Mm-hmm. I personally think that's pretty conservative because, furnishing a house is expensive. So, purchase price is $325. I just rolled it into the purchase price. Yes, you could pay cash for it, but I feel like that's the simplest way to showcase it. Down payment's a little more, $81,250. Loan amount's a little more, $243,750. Interest rate's the same, and the monthly mortgage is $1,785 in this case. With that 63% occupancy, that's 19 nights booked a night, and that's their averages off AirDNA. Mid-size markets, $136. You're looking at a total of $2592.93 in that mid-tier market. I'm sorry. When I dig into this a little bit more and I factor in, let's say, hey, I'm self-managing the property. I'm not even going to charge for management, all right? But I'm going to have cleaning costs. That's a given. There's no escaping it. You got 4% Airbnb fees just associated with credit card fees and things like that. Utilities at $325. And I'll say this too. A lot of people, when they go to Airbnbs or a hotel or anything like that, you can hang ice. I mean, there's icicles hanging off the ceiling because they use the air conditioner to the fullest extent. And so your utility bills, I would say on average, are probably a little higher. Yes, there's some time when it's down, it's vacant, but when it's used, it's really used. And then that mortgage.
I feel like you were channeling my husband just then. It's like, hey, I'm not paying for it. Let's crank it down. Like, I felt like that was what I was seeing right then. But it's true. It's absolutely true.
Yeah, it's like having free gas in your vehicle. And kind of going back to that, when people, and I'm not saying with Airbnb necessarily in every property, people are harder on furnishings and things like that when it's not theirs. I remember back in my younger years, sadly, I will admit, when I used to, if I would rent a car, I would drive it like it was the Daytona 500, Days of Thunder movie or something. It was just something that I wasn't really concerned about. So the net here is going to be about 670, 78. And that's taking out a lot of things. We're factoring in electricity, all the items there. So as we dig into this a little bit more, bear with me here. I'm going to side by side give you a comparison. So here we got the revenue on the top line, and we've got everything, from an expense side. But when it comes to the long-term rental, the short-term rental, we're giving the side by side comparison. One is going to be with management. One is zero management. One is going to be with a middle tier of 15%. The reason that's important is because it shows you how drastic that true net is going to be. One, you've got a negative $670. One, you've got a negative $1,284. Now, I would say that as a devil's advocate playing here, some people would say, well, Danny, you'll pass certain fees on to the customer. Maybe you pass on the cleaning fee. Maybe you pass on the $103.71 fees, you know, for the 4%. If that's the case, you're still very close to break even or a little positive. But what you really need to keep in mind here is that you're still not factoring in any maintenance on these short-term rentals. There's no maintenance factored here, even though we did so on the long-term rentals. So again, every property is different, and you just have to forecast every detail. Let's see. When I compare the short-term rental and the long-term rental, you're looking at expenses of $32.63 versus expenses of $21.68. Naturally, the rent amount is going to be lower with the long-term rental, but a true net after management with the long-term rental, factoring in zero here, it's the 31 positive versus the 670. And again, to re-illustrate, we're not charging any kind of management here. That's a big deal because it's a big part of the cost.
Yeah, and it is hard. It's hard to look at an exact side-by-side comparison because when you're buying an Airbnb, it's going to be in a particular area. You want to be a destination. But if you want to look at what AirDNA's #1 market is Montgomery, Alabama, which is one of our turnkey markets, this fits. This example fits. And I can't remember on that slide how many were the mid-tier, were your typical long-term rental markets. I think it was, what, 7 out of the 10, maybe, you know, it was the majority. It was the vast majority. So while you're looking, it's like, yeah, no, but I mean, yeah, I'm charging much more on the daily rate, or, you know, the income is just going to be a lot more because it's going to be a more desired area. That's not what AirDNA is saying. That's not what they're saying. They are saying that these are the areas that you need to invest in that have the best occupancy and are generating the better returns. And those are long-term rental markets.
Right.
Aside from the one.
Yeah, they functionally work very well in a long-term rental situation. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm, you know, beating the proverbial dead horse, but a long-term rental in these markets is going to be less expensive in most cases. But we're showing this as an apples-to-apples comparison at that $300K. Our average price, our sweet spot as a long-term rental is going to be between $175 and $200, I would say. And we see a tremendous amount of properties in that spot, but every property will be vetted and underwritten individually, naturally. So why are people still coming back to the Airbnb side? Some people have a hard time living in reality, and they live in the past. So I see this with agents, real estate agents. They still have to educate their customers because they think it's 2021. I'm going to have 7 offers today on my property because I listed it at 2 o'clock and it's going to be sold by nightfall. They don't realize that times have changed. The same thing with the 5K a month. The amount that they're receiving is different now, but they're living in the past because somebody told them at that time, or maybe they read it from that time period. Control, they feel like they have more control, raising and lowering rents whenever they want to. The idea that there's no cap, I think that's an illusion. I mean, well, you can have no cap. You could charge what you want to. But
I mean, right, exactly. Like you can charge a long-term rental rent whatever you want to. That doesn't mean it's going to rent. You know,
you could sit vacant.
I could put a house on the market in Montgomery, Alabama, and charge $5,000 a month in rent. I can do whatever I want. It just doesn't mean it's going to rent.
If you like 0% occupancy, that's cool. One of the things I talk about a lot with a lot of customers is the STR tax loophole. Sometimes they come to me and say, Danny, I'm going short-term rental because I can write it off against my active income, and feel free to check into that. But what they don't realize is that you still have to treat this, you still have to have material participation in this property. They think they can have someone else manage it, and because short-term rentals are considered a business, that they can just write that off against their W-2 income and everything will be great. But they usually use 2 rules. It's the 100-hour rule, saying, hey, I've got at least 100 hours into this, and no one else, cleaning lady, everybody, no one else by themselves is doing more than me, right? The other rule is I can show that I've put 500 hours in the year into this property. So if you can't show that, and then you're possibly at risk of getting audited. And I don't want to see anybody go through that. So it's something to look into deeper. Other big things, the gross revenue. We just talked about this. I don't want to go into it a whole lot deeper, but the true net's what really matters. Again, you feel like you're more in control pricing, nightly rates up and down. It's kind of like a hotel. If things are busy, you've got a concert in town or something like that. People like to be able to the idea of using a property, block dates, vacation.
And that's honestly, I know that you speak with investors a lot more often than I do, but that is the most common response. It's like, well, I have a place to take me and my family too.
Yes.
It's an investment that I can actually use as a personal space. And that is very different. That is something you definitely cannot do as a long-term rental, right? Like you can't occupy it full time and make money off of it. So that I hear that a lot.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that people like the idea of what they see on TV. They like the idea of the sexy new thing, the thing that they can brag about. I'll be very honest. I don't brag about my rental houses. Little 3.2s in Alabama, and there's nothing sexy about it. They're just little rental houses.
I'm offended, Danny. I'm offended. You should be bragging.
Again, like I said, it could be a vacation home. If you're sitting around with your cousins or friends or whatever, it sounds much cooler to say, yeah, we just bought a new vacation home. It sounds classier. It sounds sexier. So that's a big factor. And then again, those early success stories, they live in the past. They think, well, if Bob can do it, I can do it. But Bob bought it in 2017. Bob was in a better situation at the time. He locked in a lower rate. The work goes into it. Like my friend with the pool, it's work. It really is. Unless you get it in a very good situation, cost-wise, you're going to need to, you're going to have to put in work, or management's going to be very expensive for you. And so kind of going back to what we started with, are Airbnbs all bad? No, they're not. There's people that make good money with them. I can't stress enough, treat it like a business. Don't make assumptions that aren't viable. I think is a very important message. You need to be able to realize what's important to you. Is it time or money? In many of these cases, you're trading one or the other off if you're making money. And how much time is it worth to you? And so at the end of the day, just make sure it's a fit for you. Make sure it fits your investment goals. Is it a part of your diversification? Maybe. But I just want you to make sure that you look at all the aspects of it.
So a couple of questions that I've that are being sent in messages. One thing, so when you're talking to invest, like, do you also evaluate some Spartan homes as short-term rentals?
So as a company, no, we don't do anything in a short-term rental status or stance. We're not set up to operate that way. It's a very different management platform, and we're just not positioned to do so. But I've had customers say before, like, well, this would be a good, potential short-term rental. And there's very few of them that are situated to be that, right? But I mean, is it possible that a Spartan property that in 10 years or whatever, they turn it to that because the town's growing or something like that? At the end of the day, it is your property. But as a management company, as Atlas Rental Property, we do not dive into any kind of short-term rentals or management for our customers.
So one other one, have you seen any or heard of any, I know we're not typically in this space, but have you heard of any of the municipalities or restrictions being walked back with Airbnbs?
I don't know of any right off the top of my head, but I usually just see, number one, I don't live in the space on a day-to-day basis. So I don't keep up with Airbnb structurally. I don't keep up with the latest headlines of what's changed on a day-to-day basis. So I usually see the big changes like in New York and where certain cities have made it more restrictive for Airbnbs. I don't know of any walking back or just completely transitioning back to like a very landlord friendly, if you will, Airbnb friendly environment, because usually once that takes place, My understanding with a lot of these cities is they're stagnant in that way.
Yeah, I've only heard of restrictions getting tougher and harder and more fees and expenses, and so I have not heard either of any being walked back. Let's see. I think that is all. Danny, do you have anything else to wrap up before we go?
No, it's just, if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to have a candid conversation with you about Airbnb. And I'm not here to bash Airbnb, short-term rentals, long-term rentals. We live in the long-term space. I believe in having assets. If you're on this webinar right now, you're in the right place in the sense of getting educated, learning more. You may already have investments, but I believe in my core that assets are the things that will take you generationally to the next step, will create wealth, because the inflation factors, the borrowing our government does, they're not reeling that in. I know that for a fact. I think our deficit grows by a couple of trillion every year. And it's a situation that I love having candid conversations that are educationally based. So if you have any questions, feel free to set up a call, use the QR code, and I'm happy to chat.
Yeah, Danny, thank you so much for diving into that with everybody. And it really, we got this idea, and I really like this story. We got this idea from a conference that we were both at in Nashville a couple of months ago. And so an investor walked up to the table. Do you remember? An investor walked up to the table. Yeah. I mean, just brand new investor, and not to talk negatively or anything, but brand new investor, just was there to learn, which was great. Awesome. Like, that's a great place to start. And so she walked up to you, asked you a question. It's like, well, what do you guys do? And you kind of introduced, like, we do the long-term space. And she's like, oh no, I'm interested in short-term rental. And just to learn more, you said, oh really? Yeah. Why is that? And it was like, she said, because it's better. And that was it. It's just better. And it's like, okay. All right, great. So it's like, we started talking about it, and we were also having different conversations with investors who lived in Nashville and were getting rid of their short term because of all of the regulations that Nashville has implemented. It's like, hey, I'm not making any money on it. I made great money back years back. So I like that, how the conversation kind of got started very organically, and bringing that and being able to discuss that with you today. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And the greatest part about that conversation was the simple question, why? Why is it better? And there really wasn't an answer. It's just because it is. And so again, I just encourage people to do their homework, dig in. Mm-hmm. If it's better for you, great. If it's not, know why. So.
Right. Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in.